Welcome, dear listeners, to our Scary Stories, the podcast that dares to delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche. I am your host, weaving tales of horror and suspense, crafted to chill you to your core. Tonight, we invite you to journey with us into a quaint town on the brink of madness, where nightmares emerge under the watchful eyes of the stars. So turn off your lights, settle into your seat, and let the cloak of the night wrap around you. For as the clock ticks past midnight, it's time to begin our terrifying journey into the heart of Redwood. Dr. Laura Stone stepped out of her shiny, silver compact car, stretching her weary limbs and squinting against the striking contrast of a deep red sunset over Redwood. The last hints of daylight draped over quaint farms and idyllic pastures, casting elongated shadows that seemed to hide quiet stories within them. A distant crow's harsh call pierced the tranquility, the sound echoing and dissipating through the gentle evening breeze. Her nostrils filled with the rich, earthy scent of the fertile fields around her, mingled with the subtle sweetness of wildflowers. The transition from city life, with its artificial lights and incessant noise, was as startling as it was soothing. She allowed herself a moment to indulge in the peace that blanketed this rural town, a peace she hoped to imbibe in her life. Her new home, a quaint two-story house nestled among the undulating farmlands, stood welcoming with its white picket fence and blossoming rose bushes. As Laura carried her belongings inside, she felt the grainy texture of the wooden door against her palm, a touch that spoke of care and craftsmanship. The polished wooden floors underfoot creaked in an almost comforting manner, every note a testimony to the house's history and charm. In the days that followed, Laura set up her psychiatric practice within the town. Her patients were as diverse as they were intriguing, each carrying burdens too heavy for their hearts, seeking solace within her comforting office. It was a small room, furnished minimally. A couple of comfortable armchairs stood facing each other, their cushions carrying the faint scent of lavender. The walls bore calming pastel colors, while a solitary window let in streaks of sunlight, filtering through a healthy elm tree. One crisp morning, as Laura sat with her steaming cup of coffee, Sheriff Connor walked into her office, an aura of quiet authority around him. His weathered face held a friendly smile, but his eyes mirrored the town's lingering unrest. "Dr. Stone," he began, his deep voice carrying an undercurrent of worry. "There's something strange going on around here." He pulled out his phone, showing her an image of an expansive crop circle, a labyrinth of geometric patterns carved into the lush green fields. The sight was oddly unsettling, the precision and complexity suggesting something more than a mere prank. Laura studied the image, her brow furrowing as a chill snaked down her spine. An inexplicable sense of dread filled the air, thick enough to taste, as if the very image were seeping discomfort into the room. "No one knows how they got there," Connor continued, his voice barely more than a whisper. "But it's not just the fields. It's the people. Something's affecting them, Doc." As the shadows of uncertainty fell on the tranquil town of Redwood, Dr. Laura Stone realized she had a mystery to unravel, a town to save. Her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum, the rhythm spelling out her newfound mission to restore peace to this quiet hamlet, to protect it from the invisible forces lurking in their midst. It was a daunting task, yet she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the echoes of the sheriff's words rang in her ears, the game of fear had just begun. In the pre-dawn light, an eerie serenity swathed the fields outside Redwood. It was as if the world held its breath in anticipation, the atmosphere taut with a peculiar stillness. On this canvas of tranquility, the strange markings etched into the crops stood stark and disquieting. They sprawled out in bewildering intricacy, like an insidious message waiting to be deciphered. Laura visited the field with Sheriff Connor, the damp earth cold beneath her sensible shoes. A foreboding chill hung in the morning air, making her pull her coat tighter around her. A crow, perched on a lone tree nearby, shrieked its mournful song as they navigated the labyrinthine patterns. Up close, the crop circles were even more unsettling, their grandeur masking a malevolent undercurrent. As they surveyed the site, Laura noted the precision of the design. The stalks of wheat were bent but not broken, arranged in a harmonious swirl of geometric patterns that stretched as far as the eye could see. The scent of dew-soaked crops was interrupted by a strange metallic odor, akin to rusted iron, faint but persistent. A gust of wind seemed to whisper untold stories, sending an involuntary shudder through her. Back in town, a strange restlessness had begun to creep into the everyday bustle. The usually warm smiles were tight-lipped, eyes darting nervously at the mention of the crop circles. The local diner, usually a hub of cheerful conversation, was steeped in hushed whispers and tense silence. Even the food tasted different. The once comforting apple pies seemed too tart. The homemade burgers lacked their usual heartiness. As Laura entered her office that day, the first patient waiting for her was Mrs. Patricia Henderson, a usually cheerful woman in her mid-60s. But today, Patricia's twinkling blue eyes were shadowed with worry. Her usual lively chatter replaced with a nervous twitch of her fingers. "I can't sleep, Dr. Stone," Patricia confessed, wringing her hands. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those patterns." Listening to Patricia's halting words, Laura felt an icy tendril of fear curl around her heart. More patients voiced similar concerns as the day rolled on. Anxiety was spreading through Redwood like a ripple in a pond, the epicenter being the mysterious crop circles. Whispers of insomnia, panic attacks, nightmares, all seemed to have the same root cause. As evening descended, Laura sat alone in her office, staring at the painting on her wall. A calm seascape, the blues and greens usually brought her peace, but tonight they seemed to merge into a swirling confusion. The tranquility of Redwood was tainted, its people affected, and the menacing crop circles were sowing seeds of fear and paranoia. And Dr. Laura Stone found herself in the eye of this brewing storm, a lighthouse against an encroaching darkness. The whispering wind brought another morning to Redwood, but with it came the chilling news of another crop circle. Larger, more intricate than the previous, the new circle left an unsettling silence in its wake. The bright sun, usually a herald of life and warmth, threw long, monstrous shadows of the distorted crops, transforming the field into a macabre piece of art. As Laura stood on the edge of this intimidating display, the distinct scent of decaying leaves clung to the moist morning air. The field, once a symbol of life and bounty, was now tainted with an inexplicable dread. The grandeur of the patterns stirred an uneasy awe within her, an admixture of admiration and apprehension. Back in town, the ordinary life of Redwood was crumbling under a blanket of paranoia. A local grocery store was abuzz with panicked citizens hoarding supplies, their frantic chatter replacing the usual friendly banter. The laughter of children playing in the park had dimmed, replaced by a deep-seated unease that mirrored in their two adult expressions. Even the birds seemed to have lost their chirpy songs, their calls echoing a grim symphony of foreboding. The quaint office of Dr. Stone transformed into a haven for the troubled townsfolk. Mr. Jacobs, the usually jovial butcher, sat across from Laura, a shadow of his former self. His laughter, once as hearty as the steaks he sold, had faded into troubled silence. His large, meaty hands fumbled with his hat as he confessed to seeing figures lurking in the shadows. As she listened to the distressing accounts of her patients, Laura felt a suffocating tension in the air, like a string pulled too taut. Her office, with its comforting shades and tranquil paintings, started to feel oppressive. She could taste the metallic tang of fear in the air, a taste that lingered long after her patients left. One evening, as Laura sat by her window overlooking the picturesque town, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of melancholy. The wind carried faint whispers of despair as the tranquil town pulsed with an undercurrent of terror. She watched the townfolk scurry home, their quickened steps in sync with the beating of her own anxious heart. Every new crop circle, every tale of hallucination and paranoia, added layers to the mystery that threatened to consume Redwood. With each passing day, the tension strung around the town tightened. The whispers of fear grew louder, and the quiet town of Redwood lost more of its peace. Beneath the crimson hue of the setting sun, the silhouette of Dr. Laura Stone stood like a silent sentinel, committed to dispelling the encroaching darkness. As the veil of night descended on the town, her resolve hardened. She would fight this unseen enemy, this inexplicable fear that was eroding the sanity of Redwood. But little did she know that the worst was yet to come. Redwood awoke to another sunrise, the sun's rays trying in vain to cut through the thick fog of dread that had shrouded the town. But today, the horror was no longer confined to the fields. It was in their homes, lurking in the corners of their minds, and twisting their reality. Laura's morning started with a frantic phone call from Connor. His words spilled out hurriedly, carrying tales of violence and aggression, a stark contrast to the tranquility that the quiet morning held. The news was a chilling reminder of their ominous situation. It was reported that Tom Matthews, a friendly and mild-mannered farmer, had attacked his wife in a state of hallucination. Laura rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding in sync with the rhythmic thud of her shoes against the pavement. A hospital, usually a quiet and sterile place, buzzed with an urgent frenzy. The smell of antiseptic was punctuated with an underlying note of fear that lingered in the air like an uninvited ghost. In a sterilized room, under the harsh fluorescent lights, lay the burly farmer. Tom, always a figure of strength and vitality, was now a pitiful sight, tied down to his bed, his face drawn with fear and confusion. His wife, Martha, sat by his side, her usually lively eyes now dull and red-rimmed. As Laura talked to Martha, the faint aroma of the hospital food did little to mask the undercurrent of despair. The farmer's wife spoke in hushed tones, her voice quivering with disbelief. She recounted the horrors of the previous night when Tom, deluded and paranoid, had lashed out at her. The man she loved had become a stranger, his eyes filled with an unspeakable terror. The town was spiraling into a chaos of its own making. In the solitude of her office, Laura felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She took in the soft hum of the air conditioning, the comforting scent of her leather-bound books, anything to ground her in the malic of unfolding events. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, gnarly shadows that danced with an ominous glee. The eerie silence of the night was punctuated by the occasional hooting of an owl, a sinister melody that rang through the once tranquil town. The streets, once bustling with life, now stood empty and silent, a testament to the fear that gripped the hearts of Redwood's inhabitants. The once idyllic town was unraveling, each thread of sanity snapping under the oppressive weight of an unseen terror. Laura, in her quest to restore peace, found herself navigating through a fractured reality. As the moon cast an eerie glow over Redwood, she wondered how many more sunrises they could face before the town descended entirely into the throes of madness. As dawn broke over the town of Redwood, it revealed yet another grotesque masterpiece etched into the fields. A pattern more intricate than before, impossibly precise, swirled in the wheat, its unspoken message echoing through the uneasy silence. The sunrise, usually a ballet of beautiful hues, bathed the crops in an ominous light, highlighting the dreadful spectacle. This morning, Laura didn't rush to the site. Instead, she found herself drawn to the tranquility of the town's library. The musty scent of old books and the distant rustling of turning pages always comforted her. But today, the usual charm was replaced by an eerie quiet. Even the library, her sanctuary from chaos, bore the gloomy fingerprint of the town's descent into fear. As she pored over old town records, the librarian, Miss Daisy, hovered nearby, her usual chatter replaced by quiet fretting. She wrung her hands as she recounted strange murmurs she'd heard in her solitude, a whispered language that seemed to resonate with the patterns in the field. Meanwhile, the town's paranoia escalated into a terrifying spectacle. The school, usually filled with the sound of children's laughter, was silenced. The bright, colorful classrooms were now empty. The drawings on the walls, once lively and vibrant, seemed to sag under the weight of an invisible dread. The playground lay abandoned, the swing set creaking hauntingly under the touch of an absent breeze. In the heart of the town, the church stood as an island in the sea of unrest. Pastor Williams, usually a beacon of faith, found himself helpless in the face of the unexplainable. His powerful sermons were replaced by desperate prayers. The church bells no longer chimed with hope, but rang with a frantic plea for salvation. The faces of the townsfolk bore a mask of shared terror. Conversations were punctuated by uneasy glances, shared silences, and unfinished sentences. The once jovial community was now a maze of suspicious eyes and hushed whispers. Friendships strained under the burden of shared paranoia, neighbors cast doubtful looks across their fences, and homes were tightly locked as day turned to night. Laura, laden with tales of dread and paranoia, returned to her office. The setting sun cast a gloomy shadow on her desk, and the usual serenity of her space did little to quell the chaos outside. The taste of the day's bitter coffee lingered, reminding her of the bitter reality they were all trapped in. As night enveloped the town, the haunting specter of insanity loomed closer. The line between reality and hallucination blurred further. The veil of normality wore thin. The usually comforting blanket of darkness was now an omen of the unseen horror that lay in wait. Amidst this all, Dr. Laura Stone stood as Redwood's unwavering guardian, staring defiantly into the face of the encroaching insanity. The sun dawned over Redwood, painting the sky in hues of despair. The crop circles, menacing reminders of the lurking horror, stood defiantly against the morning light. A fresh pattern had appeared overnight, its chilling complexity casting a long, dark shadow over the town. Laura began the day at the police station, an old building suffused with the scent of stale coffee and worn-out paperwork. Sheriff Connor looked worn, his usual spark drowned by sleepless nights and countless reports of erratic behavior among the townsfolk. His office, usually a hub of order, was now cluttered with incidents of paranoia-induced violence and tales of hallucinations that blurred the line between nightmare and reality. As they reviewed the accounts, Connor received a call about an incident at the local high school. A quiet student, Emily, had reportedly attacked her classmates, her terror-stricken eyes reflecting a dread that echoed the town's collective fear. At the high school, the hallway echoed with a deafening silence, punctuated only by the faint rustle of a forgotten textbook. The classrooms were hollow shells of laughter and learning, their vibrant colors swallowed by the weight of the unspoken dread. The once gleaming trophies in the glass case stared out with a tarnished luster, reflecting the lost vibrancy of the town. In the school's sterile infirmary, Emily sat in a state of bewilderment, her usually sparkling eyes dimmed with confusion and fear. As Laura approached her, the girl recoiled, her pale face etched with a terror that was all too familiar. Emily spoke in whispers, her words painting images of shadowy figures whispering in a language that seemed strangely reminiscent of the patterns in the fields. Back in her office, Laura pondered over the shared narratives. She ran her fingers over the patterns of her carpet, her senses heightened by the urgency of the situation. The faint aroma of chamomile tea hung in the air, a poor mask for the metallic taste of fear that had seeped into every corner of Redwood. As the night fell, an unease settled over the town. A moon bathed the streets in a pale, ghostly light, casting elongated shadows that danced with a chilling glee. The rhythmic hoot of an owl, once a comforting soundtrack, now echoed the town's collective dread. The comforting quilt of darkness seemed to transform into a claustrophobic shroud, smothering the last remnants of sanity. The town was teetering on the brink of insanity, each thread of reason strained to its breaking point. Dr. Laura Stone, amid this pandemonium, held steadfast. As Redwood sank further into its nightmare, she clung to her determination, her mind desperately seeking answers in the symphony of the unseen. Under the lifeless gray sky, a new morning dawned over Redwood. But with it, a fresh crop circle was birthed into existence. The patterns, evolving in complexity, seemed to sing a discordant melody that seeped into the consciousness of the town. This chilling symphony echoed around the town, resonating with their mounting fears and madness. Amidst this escalating horror, Laura was drawn to the one place she hadn't explored, the old abandoned barn at the edge of town. This rustic relic of the past held a mysterious allure, a potential link to the cryptic puzzle that threatened to consume the town. The barn, once a hub of agricultural life, now stood like a forgotten memory, its once vibrant paint peeling off, revealing scars of time underneath. A lingering scent of old hay and rusted metal hung heavy in the air. A strange hush pervaded the barn, as though the very air was holding its breath, waiting for the secrets within to be unveiled. Inside, amidst dust-coated remnants of farm equipment, Laura discovered a forgotten piece of the past. An old town record book, its pages yellowed with age, bore a striking revelation. A similar phenomenon had plagued the town decades ago. Fading black and white photographs revealed similar crop patterns, a chilling testament to history repeating itself. Meanwhile, the town's descent into chaos accelerated. The coffee shop, usually filled with warm chatter and the intoxicating aroma of freshly brewed coffee, was shrouded in an unsettling silence. A barista moved robotically, her gaze distant, as she poured cups of forgotten coffee orders. In the park, the lush greenery stood still, the leaves refusing to rustle. The usually vibrant flowers seemed to droop, their colors dimming under the weight of the town's collective dread. The crisp scent of the blooming roses was now tinged with the bitter undertones of terror. As night fell, the veil of darkness seemed to amplify the unease that clung to Redwood. The quaint houses, once brimming with warmth, stood as cold monuments to the unseen horror. The lights within flickered nervously, casting restless shadows on the deserted streets. Beneath the uncaring gaze of the moon, the unsettling symphony of nightmares played on, the haunting melody seeping deeper into the fabric of Redwood. Within the chaos, Laura clung to the fragile thread of discovery, her heart fluttering with a newfound hope. The forgotten past may hold the key to their salvation, a beacon in the pervasive darkness that threatened to consume them all. Under the stern gaze of a merciless morning sun, another pattern was etched into the canvas of crops. The spectacle, more elaborate than its predecessors, sprawled menacingly across the field. The unsettling shapes were a tangible echo of the dreadful symphony that had seeped into the town's consciousness. Armed with the discovery from the old barn, Laura dove into the town's forgotten history. In the worn pages of the town record book, she uncovered tales of a similar terror that had once gripped Redwood. Like a phantom from the past, the nightmare had resurfaced, dragging the town into its chilling embrace. Back in the day, the townsfolk had turned to an eccentric recluse, Mr. Whitman, known for his knowledge of ancient rituals and symbols. He had been instrumental in restoring peace. His unconventional methods, however strange, had seemed to work. With this newfound knowledge, Laura decided to find Mr. Whitman's surviving relatives. The path led her to an old stone house on the outskirts of the town. Once opulent, it now stood in silent decay, the grandeur replaced by an air of melancholic desolation. The taste of ancient dust and forgotten stories was palpable in the chilly air, the faint musty smell of old parchment filling the rooms. In the study, Laura met Mr. Whitman's granddaughter, Nora. She was a woman in her 60s, her eyes carrying a strange light that bore an eerie resemblance to her grandfather's. Nora, recalling her grandfather's tales, recounted a cryptic ritual that was used to quiet the haunting symphony. The ritual, passed down through generations, seemed bizarre, but Laura had no choice but to take a leap of faith. Meanwhile, Redwood continued to spiral into fear-induced chaos. The grocery store, once filled with the bustling sounds of shopping and light-hearted banter, was eerily silent. The fruits and vegetables lay untouched, their vibrant colors stark against the gray cloud of dread that hung over the town. Night descended upon Redwood, wrapping the town in its cold, unsettling embrace. The moon, indifferent to the town's plight, cast a ghostly glow over the empty streets. The silence of the night was shattered by the occasional yelp of a dog, a haunting serenade to the town's shared terror. As Redwood teetered on the brink of madness, Laura held on to the flicker of hope that came with the echo from the past. The forgotten ritual, bathed in the light of the moon, could perhaps turn the tide. The path to salvation lay in the words of a bygone era, the town's last defense against the symphony of nightmares. A day, chilling in its silence, began in Redwood. The sun, a distant and uncaring observer, cast its unforgiving light on another intricate pattern that had appeared overnight. Its frightening design was an eerie testament to the unseen dread tightening its hold on the town. Laura, with Nora's help, began preparations for the ritual. According to Nora, the ritual had to be performed in the heart of the crop circle under the light of the full moon. The chilling symphony of dread seemed to be an auditory embodiment of the patterns that desecrated the town's fields. The ritual, infused with ancient wisdom, was intended to disrupt this symphony, putting an end to the town's descent into madness. In the town square, an air of cautious optimism mingled with the prevalent dread. As Laura and Nora communicated their plans, whispers of hope began to punctuate the stifling silence. The faces of the townsfolk, weathered by fear, showed the faintest glimmers of resolve. The town's diner, usually vibrant with the smell of pancakes and freshly brewed coffee, was now a meeting point of whispered prayers and shared courage. Evening cloaked Redwood in anticipation. As dusk melted into night, the town held its breath. The once warm and inviting houses stood in shared apprehension, their silhouettes casting long, anxious shadows on the deserted streets. The usual night sounds seemed to quieten, giving way to an almost reverential silence. Under the watchful gaze of the full moon, Laura and Nora stood in the heart of the latest crop circle. The silver moonlight bathed the complex pattern, casting an ethereal glow over the unnerving spectacle. The ritual began, their words forming a counter-melody to the frightening symphony that had gripped the town. As the incantation grew louder, a strange harmony seemed to descend upon Redwood. The ritual, an orchestration of the old language, resonated with a power that seemed to challenge the haunting symphony. The tension hung in the air like a tangible entity, a silent war being waged against the unseen dread. As the night grew darker, Redwood trembled on the edge of a desperate hope. The ritual, reverberating under the moonlit sky, carried the weight of the town's shared longing for peace. The unseen dread was finally meeting its match, the echoes from the past converging into a powerful beacon of resistance. The stillness of the Redwood night was pierced by the culmination of the ritual. As Laura and Nora voiced the final words, a profound silence swept across the town. The once vibrant patterns in the crops seemed to lose their menacing allure, bathed in the gentle glow of the moonlight. The chilling symphony of dread that had held the town hostage was suddenly and eerily absent. In the quiet aftermath, an air of cautious relief began to percolate through the townsfolk. The ominous quiet that had blanketed the houses was replaced by hushed whispers of hope. In the quiet streets, dimly lit by hesitant moonlight, a semblance of peace was cautiously embraced. Sleep, which had eluded Redwood for days, finally descended on the town. The once vibrant dreamscape, tainted by the nightmares of the unknown, slowly returned to its benign self. Dreams, long forgotten, once again danced behind closed eyelids, a testament to the human spirit's resilience. The sun rose over a transformed Redwood. Its rays no longer unveiled new patterns of dread, but bathed a town teetering on the brink of renewed sanity. As the townsfolk ventured out, the palpable relief was marred only by the lingering traces of their shared terror. The grocery store bustled with activity, the scent of fresh produce replacing the stifling air of dread. Laughter, timid at first, echoed through the school corridors as young Emily returned, her eyes no longer shadowed by fear. The coffee shop hummed with the familiar drone of gossip and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, signaling a return to normalcy. As Redwood slowly pieced its life back together, Dr. Laura Stone watched the town from her office window. The daunting patterns, once a symbol of terror, now lay as mere impressions on the landscape, a grim reminder of the horror that had held the town captive. Amidst the remnants of the chilling symphony, Redwood had found its melody of resilience, heralding the dawn of sanity. In the heart of the dreadful memory, there was an endearing hope, a newfound strength and unity. The town had not just survived, but emerged stronger, a phoenix rising from the ashes of its ordeal. And as life pulsed through the streets of Redwood, the haunting echoes of the nightmare symphony became fainter until they were nothing more than whispers lost in the wind. And so we leave Redwood, a town that faced its nightmares and emerged stronger, its sanity reclaimed from the jaws of an unseen horror. Thank you, dear listeners, for accompanying us on this chilling journey through the symphony of nightmares. Remember, when the darkness seeps in and your fears start to rise, it's only a tale. Or is it? Until we meet again in another one of our stories, remember, we are not alone in our fear, and the human spirit, however frail at times, is capable of overcoming even the most sinister of nightmares. Keep your lights on, your doors locked, and your mind open. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.